This is your host, Walter Damager, bringing you back for another exciting podcast adventure on an all-in politics, on an all-in network, the jump off. We got a lot to talk about today, man, but let me introduce you to two of my most collaborative individuals in the room. The first is...
At Rob Cooper Jr. What's going on, family?
What's going on? We got an exciting guest with us in the room tonight, man.
That's right, man. We welcome back, Tim. You know, our what we call our political analyst / co-host. Anytime, we always happy anytime you can come and Tim. Quite frankly, before I let you reintroduce yourself to the All In Politics family, man, you always seem to show up when the fire comes, man.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be
You must
back.
be the one that's bringing the heat.
I guess so. Yeah, thanks for having me back. I'm really happy to be a part of this again. I'm Tim. I'm a member of Socialist Revolution, which is the American branch of the International Marxist Tendency, or IMT. So hope to give some perspective from that point of view on these events. And thanks for bringing me on.
Well, you know, it's really interesting times as things really start to heat up. The political climate, as you know, both we've watched 2 weeks of infomercials, political infomercials, the Democratic National Convention a week ago, and then just completed the Republican National Convention this week. So a lot of predictable things came out of both conventions. I think anyone here in this room, none of us was surprised to hear the rhetoric that would be spewed on both sides. But I think our duty today is really to kind of break things down and help our listening audience get a perspective of what's going on and how we can move this thing forward. What can we do as citizens? Because ultimately, we're the ones who are responsible, make the choice and do the right thing for the American government and the politics and policies. But one of the things I think that has reared its ugly head again is police terror. And I think last time you were on with us, Tim, I think you came on at the brink of George, the murder in Minnesota, and now just one state below, across the state lines, in North Central America, in Wisconsin, we saw the attempted murder of Jacob Blake Jr. By once again folks who we pay our tax money to defend us. So let's jump into that before we get into the ruling class. Let's just really address police terror and what's happening in America, and what we can do about it as citizens. I mean, we've seen the marches. Tremendous unity that's out there on the streets. We saw it back in May and June. Things kind of slowed down a little bit in July, but things are starting to pick back up again. And it's interesting, the coverage of corporate media. So we want to talk about all of it, the perspective of things, and how the ruling class is really handling this situation as opposed to the Black Lives Matter back in June. Tim, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a lot. But I do think that we saw these events really kick off in the early summer after George Floyd's murder, and there was great participation. We all saw, a lot of us participated in it, and we saw the reaction from politicians. Basically telling us that they, knew that how we felt, and offering sort of very aesthetic responses. I think highlighted when Nancy Pelosi took a knee with the kente cloth on. But really, it shows you that these they're trying to diffuse this mass support against the police without doing anything meaningful, any meaningful reform, and we're going to continue to see police violence, especially. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about this, but as we sort of enter these myriads of crises, economic, social, political, that without any actual real action, that these things are going to continue happening. What we can do, I think, it was really inspiring to see the level of spontaneous demonstration that came out, and the just mass participation that we saw, and spontaneously we sort of saw these demands sort of rise up. Defund the police, even abolish the police, sort of came about as it sort of this movement started to develop. But you also see the limitations to spontaneous action, where if you can imagine what that movement would have been able to accomplish with some sort of organized sort of network between these movements, sort of coordination, and coming into the streets with a laid out platform and laid out demands, I think could accomplish a lot more, because even with demands like defund the police, they are are vague enough that the ruling class, who wants to quickly sort of diffuse these movements and offer these reforms to get people off the streets, and back into voting for them, I guess, can even take a movement that to many that seems very radical, but they're like New York City was able to just sort of move some money around, shuffle some papers around and call it reform, hoping that it would be enough. And so I think what we can do is, I think this is the very beginning of these movements. I mean, we're going to continue to see this. There's going to be plenty of, I'm afraid, more violence on the behalf of the police. And so what I think we need to start working on is, building a more organized system with demands to come forward, to a program basically that we can put forward, and not just be satisfied with these sort of very vague reforms that are being offered. They're not even really reforms, they're just basically
right.
Right.
Yeah. Good. Well,
I know one of the biggest frustrations that is being shown, and I think I can speak for a lot of the populace, is that when a situation happens, either the police chief or the governor of that region, their first response is, well, we didn't see what happened and we got to gather data. I mean, that's the biggest, I think, misrepresentation of these organizations, because in order for you to even give the story to the public, or even before you become before the people, I believe you should have everything you needed to facilitate your conferences. I mean, it's totally unacceptable that it's within 24 hours, 48 hours, you're giving a news conference and you don't have all the correct information to disperse amongst the people. I mean, like you said, just to piggyback off you, Tim, to have a more transparent and open communication organization, one is going to have to be one, transparency and truth. I mean, if you can't be truthful and transparent in what you're trying to deliver, you're never going to gain the trust of anybody.
Yeah, I think, well, that's a very strong tactic, of course, where they, the police can, sit back and sort of come up with their story. They want to collect data. I think the trial for the cops that murdered George Floyd isn't happening till like January or something. Hoping to basically come back when the heat is off, basically. It's definitely a tactic, But I think the mistake that people make and are sort of waking up to is that the state and the police are sort of this neutral arbiter, this like neutral party in these disputes, that we can trust the judicial system to sort of not have an objective stance to this, when we need to basically make clear to people that the role of the police is to enforce the very unequal and exploitative class hierarchy that we have, which in this country is inseparably tied up with white supremacy. And they have to maintain that class hierarchy and deal with the social repercussions that come about because of that oppressive system, where you have a very small group that owns the vast majority of property and a very large majority that's propertyless and does all the work. And to maintain that level of inequality in the society, and then that has all sorts of social consequences and repercussions that the police are also tasked with upholding. And then what's so interesting about these protests is it's also a direct challenge to their right to kill citizens, and a direct challenge to the police's ability to sort of stand above society and act with impunity. So to rely on the state to work these things out, which is basically what we're being told, as you said, Walt, is like, oh, trust the process, let the courts go through, because they are some sort of neutral party is false. And we need to expose, especially with people who want to defund or abolish the police, the role they play in a capitalist system, and that you can't really replace them until you get rid of the class system that we have. So I mean, you see a lot of right-wing commentators like, oh, if you abolish the police, they'll just get replaced by private guards and whatnot. And that's somewhat true, because there is a vacuum there where with a level of inequality in a society that we have, you need a force to enforce that, literally. So that is sort of what we have to make clear as these things continue to happen, and working people continue to sort of confront this reality literally face to face, is that these people serve a purpose, and you're on the wrong side of them, basically, or they're on the wrong side of you. And there's some amazing images of like right-wing protesters being like guarded by police lines, against Black Lives Matter protesters, or police like around banks. I mean, these are very stark examples of sort of this role that they play, and we need to expose that, where if we really want to get rid of police violence, we need to abolish a system that creates the need for that, basically.
It's real interesting, and I'm starting to think too, if we as a people are looking to truly address this problem, I want to start thinking about the messaging of how we present real solutions. And I'm starting to think, is the message of abolish the police, is that really a true and effective message? Because when you look at it, the police issue is really just a symptom of a much larger systemic problem that we're seeing. So looking at that, right, and I'm almost thinking that we're almost playing in the ruling classes hands when we talk about abolish the police, or F the police, or F-112, or ACAP, or whatever, all those type of slogans out there. Because what happens is when you put that type of information, all of us, have a family member that's a police officer. See, they play on this, right? You may have a fraternity brother that may be, or a good friend that you grew up with who's a police officer, an uncle and aunt. You know what I mean? So they play on that emotions, right? Folks can, these family members cannot, fathom the thought of a loved one going to work as a police officer and not returning back home. So the ruling class kind of works that. And, how would it sound if we really, and this is really the true message that we want to get out, is not necessarily abolish the police, but abolish the whole goddamn state. or abolish the whole system, abolish the whole class system, period. You know what I mean? Because if you abolish those pieces, those components, is the direct result of the police actions or the direct cause of the police actions that we see, then only then can we eradicate that police violence. And I want us to really talk a little bit about this, because I think we're at a point now, we're at a breaking point where I think we can go either way. We can go in either direction. So I want to see, especially you, Tim, I want to talk a little bit about this. Could it be in the messaging and what we're asking for? Maybe we need some clarity there.
Yeah, I think messaging is extremely important. And what we need is to take these real issues that people are facing every day, whether your family member is a police officer or whether the police are an occupying force in your neighborhood, and tie it to these systemic problems of capitalist social relations, basically. And so things like only the working class can defeat, police terror, or, I'm trying to come up with slogans off the top of my head,
Right.
But things that would tie it to capitalism and class exploitation and racial exploitation. And so any slogan that is able to link or connect those two dots, I think, is what the messaging needs to be, where to fight this level of terror and just impunity by the police, who are being actively supported by not only Republicans and the boogeyman Trump, but the Democrats, where the most of the crimes that are happening by the police are in cities that are basically one-party states for the Democratic Party, where we need to, and without proper messaging, people have illusions in the fact that like the Democratic Party will save them, or voting for Biden will save them, or trusting in these institutions, while we need to make clear that organized working class movements can do a lot more to guard these, where in Wisconsin and Illinois alone, I think there's over 1 million unionized workers, where if they were able to start striking in solidarity with these protesters, things would quickly change. I think the politicians would start tripping over themselves to solve this. And I think it's promising. We saw sort of glimmers of this with the NBA's and Major League Baseball's strikes in solidarity with the protests. I just read that they were quickly convinced to get back to work. I believe Obama convinced them, where and basically said, okay, we're gonna give piecemeal voting, like we're gonna open up arenas for voting booths and get back to work. And that shows you, even the Democrats, I think, would be horrified if people started acting and connecting politics to organized labor and having political strikes like that. Because in the end, the Democrats, just like the Republicans, are a party of the capitalist class, and they want the police to continue functioning and the way they are. And they might condemn this or that, murder, but in the end, they need to maintain that system. So yeah, that I think any message that can expand police terror to the role of the police in our society and connecting it to working class movements, I think would be very promising and very strong, and building a movement that could actually meaningfully affect the terror and power that police have as in these cities, and or not even cities, all over. So
Yeah.
I think those would be sort of the messaging of connecting the dots, basically.
Yes. This podcast is brought to you by the All In Network. Don't forget to head over to allin.net to find all other podcasts, including All In Podcasts with Elijah Cooper and Mike Batson, Rain and Bliss podcast, Real Deal Radio, All In Politics, which we're on today, and the Beast Gaming podcast. And also, not only go into the website of allin.net, but also go over to that YouTube channel, which is the All In Network YouTube channel. And Walt, I need your help with this. What should they do when they get to the All In YouTube channel? What should they do?
They should jump up, do a 360 turn, and smash that subscribe button.
Smash that subscribe button, and that way you will be updated on all of this great information that is coming to you through the All In Network. But Tim, you made a really good point. And speaking of, the NBA, I would say kind of work stoppage or work slowdown, maybe. I think is the best way to say. Yes, I mean, at the end of the day, when they got into, the room, I heard there was some intense conversation. It seems like, the NBA, they're kind of like representing all the sports. So what happened, what happened in that room, or what decisions were made in that room, ultimately, affected the WNBA, the NHL, Major League Baseball, and, even some individual sports like tennis. So it's just interesting to kind of see, the ruling class kind of stepping in and understanding the power that the people really have and the power of the working class. And, it's funny because the corporate media presented, as you mentioned, Tim, about Obama meeting with LeBron James and some of the, the leaders in the NBA Players Association to essentially tell them to get back to work. And it was presented as, Obama coming through as this savior, right? The working class could not possibly, figure this out on your own. We need someone from the ruling class to kind of help us think through their racism. We need someone from the ruling class to help us think through their violent actions, and quite frankly, we need somebody from the ruling class to help the working class to help them get through their issues with imperialism. And so here's where we're at right now. Now, I must say, I give the professional athletes a lot of credit because, quite frankly, they did something. And I know we're sitting here, talking to, the average Joe part of the working class, but they did something that 98% of us, the rest of us, were not willing to do. And that was they were willing to sacrifice a paycheck. Of course, many of us are not in that position, right? We all live paycheck to paycheck, which is another scheme, put on us by the ruling class, having us chase this, as we talked before, fake money for fake security in an imperialistic fascist country. I'm just going to put it straight up out there. And I think the issue right now, one of the reasons why we're currently, Trump admitted it 2 months ago, that the ruling class needs the police force to what, quote unquote, dominate the streets again. And, part of that domination is not just police terror, but it's the fear of losing your job, the fear of, losing your basic necessities of life, your food, clothing, and shelter. That's what the real fear is. You know what I mean? Most of us can give a damn about a police officer, to be quite honest with you. Okay. But The real fear is being homeless. The real fear is being hungry. The real fear is being naked. And how could we, as those who are intelligent enough to understand that this is really a scheme, how can we better educate the masses and let them know that, hey, if you just step up, food, clothing, and shelter will be provided to you automatically? Talk
Yeah,
about that a little bit.
that's the gun that the capitalist class has to the working class to make them sell their labor. And if you don't sell your labor, that's in a way that's profitable to the capitalists. You face all the horrible things that you described, and there are plenty of people who can do that. And it's not like we don't have the resources to do anything about that. We have more food than we can use. We're destroying it, but people go hungry. There are more empty houses than homeless people, and yet they're homeless. So, but they sort of need that level of coercion to maintain this system. So, but your question of like, yeah, when people take action and strike and withhold their labor, they are taking a great risk. And the key to that is to have sort of these mass movements of solidarity. So I like to use a good example. It's quite recent, where in May 1968, the French working class went on a massive general strike. And what you saw was, chefs cooking food for these striking workers. People started making little makeshift daycare centers for the children of these striking workers. You had defense committees and councils set up to protect the striking workers from the police and their collaborating fascist gangs. You had, teachers were teaching kids, and what, so that there's strikes on certain industries that, usually have something, economic goals, better wages, better working conditions, like we saw, as the pandemic hit, or these are, very sort of pointed, acute sort of strikes where, we aren't being provided the right safety equipment to work here, so we're going to strike until that comes about. And that's more of an economic strike. There are political strikes like the NBA, where they're striking for political reasons, which are even, more expansive. But what a general strike is an actual challenge of power, where you're questioning the very status quo of like the society that you're living in, where you're basically setting up what's called dual power, where you like the society sort of goes on without the capitalists and the state, and you're basically able to basically set up your own institutions. And in this case, in France, they had Charles de Gaulle fleeing the country. Like, the state was paralyzed in the face of this. It was so widespread and so massive that they literally fled away, and they fled off. And the only thing that, and the power was there basically for the taking for the workers. They could have seriously set up their own worker state. And what derailed it, which is sort of what we were talking about just a minute ago, was people coming in this case, the communist parties of the 60s, which were very Stalinist parties, basically told them that the workers weren't ready for power, like you just said. They couldn't do it themselves, and that they needed to bring back these capitalist systems, and bring back the state, and basically sandbag the movement when the opportunity was there. So, and that's to sort of they're not very equivalent, but like to a lesser extent what Obama did with the NBA, which is like basically like it's not the same as in like the power of the workers was there to seize the state, but like my point being like diffusing away these energies, putting them into safe channels that are not a threat to the capitalist system. Like he basically took this political strike of the NBA, basically like we're withholding our labor until meaningful political change happens, and basically getting them to make it easier for people to vote, and not only vote but vote for them, like vote for Democrats. So that those are two very different examples in their scale, but I think it addresses both your questions of like what a mass coordinated workers movement is capable of, how creative it can be in maintaining the livelihood of the people participating in it, where in many cases people's lives would get better. And then also the dangers of people desperately and sort of who are looking to maintain the capitalist status quo, desperately trying to diffuse these energies away and sort of put it back in the box, which is also a very, something that we're going to start having to see more and more as I believe these movements begin to escalate and the class struggle begins to escalate as this crisis that we're barreling into unfolds.
This
Yeah.
is yeah. Go ahead. Well, first of all, I'll just say one thing to you. As we've been discussing when we were looking at the Democratic and the Republican conventions,
Conventions.
I know you were watching the Republican one with more attention than I have, quite frankly and quite honestly. But I just want to talk a little bit about recap some of the things that we talked about on the Democratic side. And speaking of Obama, one of the themes in the Democratic Party that I found interesting is that they gave a voice to a socialist like Bernie Sanders, a more moderate type centrist like President Obama and Michelle Obama. And then you had a capitalist like Mike Bloomberg speaking. So you kind of had all three, quote unquote, branded ideologies under the so-called tent. The interesting piece about it is they all did have one common theme. And want us to talk a little bit about this is saying that this is really not a Democratic or Republican or a Joe Biden versus Donald Trump type of election. What this really is an election that is to save democracy. Let's talk a little bit about that. What is democracy, and what does democracy mean to you? So I'll start with you, Walt. And Walt, you might be on mute. Well, I'll start with you, Tim.
Democracy means the free will of the people. So we are indebted.
Yeah, it sounds like Walt, you're having some internet issues right now. And Walt, for the folks out there, Walt, those in the Philadelphia area, you may have been involved or seen it. You may have had experienced these same issues. A lot of internet and power lines went down yesterday, from my understanding, in the Philadelphia area. So right now we're having some difficulty here in Walt. But Tim, I'm going to throw it to you as far as what does democracy mean?
That's a very big question, a good question. For us, I think we live in a capitalist democracy as opposed to what we would call like a healthy workers' democracy, where I think it may have been Marx that said, the workers are always allowed to choose which one of the representatives of the capitalist class are going to oppress them. Where our democracy here is quite managed. I believe the United States is actually categorized as a flawed democracy, where we are given the illusion of choice, of which vetted candidate will represent us and go on to basically serve the interests of capital in the government. And that sort of goes back to like the large tent sort of approach of the Democrats, where we are being told that all these people have the same interest, and that these interests are not diametrically opposed, as Marxists would argue. So what is democracy is, in this system, basically a nice sheen over a very rigid and oppressive system. And that's, historically speaking, that's the most stable form of a capitalist government, is sort of a liberal democracy, where sort of the illusion of political power is there for people, and they feel that they can sort of make a difference. And I think that is starting to really strain in people's minds, where they are starting to realize, especially after the primaries of 2016 and 2020, that how little political power people have going into a booth and pushing a button every 2 to 6 years for candidates who have basically passed the gatekeepers. And that doesn't go into all the gerrymandering, the electoral college, the undemocratic layout of the Senate, going on and on and on about all these other institutions that are there to sort of control, and all these barricades that are sort of in the way of actual mass participation in the government. And this is by design. This was set up by the founding fathers. They were set up where you had a white male wealthy landowning elite that was terrified of bringing the masses into politics and having mass government. So these contradictions, and all the contradictions in the Declaration of Independence and the way the Constitution is set up, this is designed. So capitalism, when you have to maintain such a unequal society where literally a handful of people own the vast majority of wealth and the economy, like the productive capability of the economy is their private property, and then you have to have a mass of people that does all the work and is subject to the level of coercion that we were talking about earlier, and exploited and not paid the value of their labor. To maintain that level of inequality while also introducing democracy is a very risky business, I guess. It's a very sort of love-hate relationship, where there's a lot of effort gone into like I said, maintaining democracy for the sake of stability, but also managing it so that no result of that democracy can ever challenge the interest of the capitalists. And since what we've seen over the last sort of 50 years is a real dismantling of the ability of the state to even affect these large economic forces. They're so international now and so monopolized that the state can't really do much anymore to rein them in. And that was also set up by design, right? These are intentional changes. So what is democracy now is what a Marxist would call bourgeois democracy, or capitalist democracy, which is democracy for managing the interests of the capitalists, where they don't always agree. They have different ideas of the best way to do things, and you need a state to sort of arbitrate between them and give the masses some illusion of participation so that they don't start questioning why we are in such an unequal society.
That's right. That's right.
Which is opposed to a workers' democracy, which is I've been talking a while, but it's a whole different idea.
No, it's good.
Yeah. And well, your thoughts. I know you kind of fell out a little bit when you were trying to talk. So if you just want to kind of restate your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was just simply piggybacking off what Tim was saying. Excuse the background for a minute. Got extra noise. But as it was stated, just like the people, I mean, it's this allure factor where we have this vision that everything is willed toward the will of the people, and we know that that isn't such. I mean, like right now, even with these elections, we're seeing that the polarization of us even having inclination that we have control is being tested. So we have the powers that be give you these opportunities to place forth the effort from the people to use this voting situation to hold on to a democracy. I believe Barack Obama had even said it in one of his speeches that this may be your last chance at getting and fighting for your your last stance at democracy.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, at this point, I mean, it's going to be for the will of the people. I mean, the revolution is definitely approaching at a fast pace. And in order for us to maintain what we have, well, what's little left to even benchmark and move forward on, we definitely want to have to, galvanize and stick together and make it pull through.
And then moving over to the Republican convention, which was held this week and just concluded with Donald Trump's speech. Going into the convention, the Republicans or the RNC made no bones about it. They said, and I quote, "We have no platform." And I tell you, I've been following politics and I've watched both the Republican and the Democratic National Conventions since 1980. So I've been watching this a long time. This is the first time in my lifetime that I ever saw a political, both major and minor parties, because even the minor parties, People's Party or the Communist Party, at least everyone has a platform.
Right.
So it caught me by surprise that a major political party here in the United States, came right out and said, we have no platform when we're moving forward with this agenda and moving forward with this convention. Basically, our only platform and our only agenda is to follow Donald Trump. Tim, what's your thoughts on that?
They also, before Tim started,
Yeah,
they basically just declared war on the American people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that though. Let's talk about that lack of a platform. Tim, start with you.
Yeah, I think it's very stark what both these parties are drawing and what the lines they're drawing. You're talking about like Obama going up there and saying this is between democracy and democracy collapsing, and then Trump and the Republicans get up there and say this is election to save America. So they have these very confused, but like these ideas of what America should be, and they're laying out the election as a choice, but an existential life or death decision between what America should be and then the abyss, basically. And both parties are doing that, and I think it's actually quite dangerous. So I think the lack of a platform is present in both cases. And that stems from the level of contradictions that we're talking about before, where, and this is even more true in the Democratic Party, I think, because of they're trying to appeal to such a broad base that with so many conflicting interests that you can't really stand for anything, because to do so would alienate someone they're trying to bring in. So they can't denounce the protests that are going on right now, the Black Lives Matter protests, but they can't embrace them. They can't do anything. They can't not talk about climate change. They have to talk about climate change, but they also kind of behind the scenes take out the part of the Democratic platform that wanted to end subsidies to fossil fuel. So they're going to continue subsidies to fossil fuel while also talking about how great, you know, how big of a threat climate change is. They want to talk about how great the ACA is, but also talk about how broken our healthcare system is and how much reform we need. And they do this by not really addressing anything substantial or like actual concrete policies. They appeal to values, which and things that are more subjective and how people feel, and things that we can all sort of say we share without making any meaningful change. So everyone can say, oh, like I value Black lives, I value climate reform. You get people, you know, Obama and Biden going up there talking about wealth inequality when wealth inequality exploded during the 8 years they were in power. And so they do this by appealing to values, which is they think and is very helpful, because not only does it sort of you know, everyone, like I said, can sort of say they share these values, and it sort of appeals to people's feeling and may get people out to vote, I guess, but they don't really have to do anything real. They don't have to pass any legislation. They don't have to change anything on a systemic level, because they can't, because like I said, they're limited by what's acceptable to the interests of capital.
Right.
And this is also true of the Republicans, where, you know, but I get a little scared because I start to see 2016 again, where they are, you know, they're lying through their teeth, they're all con men, but they're actually addressing concrete issues as opposed to just appealing to people's values and saying, oh yeah, look at all these bad things, like we feel you, like the Democrats are. They're actually talking about jobs and trade deals and endless wars. I think Trump was the only one to address our endless wars. I don't think the Democrats talked about foreign policy at all. Actually, they had Colin Powell speak.
Right.
So that's what scares me a little bit, is because that's sort of what happened before, is like, yeah, he's a liar and he's a demagogue, but he's actually sort of addressing these issues that are you know, causing problems for people, and he can rightfully point out Joe Biden's role in making all these things happen, which is, you know, not good.
Yeah.
So, but they can't really, none of them can really address, you know, any real substantial issue. And we can talk a little bit about that, but you know, that's why I think we need more of a class independent workers party eventually in this country, if we, you know, can get that far. But I think it's really stark that not only are they, you know, they're not really putting anything forward. There is no future from either party in a real meaningful sense. There is no future to look forward to. It's only these existential threats that are bearing down from the other party that you need to vote for them to stem off either the liberal Marxist and Antifa hordes that are coming into your suburbs, or the fascism, creeping fascism and end of democracy. It just depends what party.
That's right. And Walt, it's interesting. Tim touched on the both parties and their particular approaches to international intervention in wars. You had mentioned before we went to Tim. You mentioned about the specifically about the RNC declaring war on the American people. I want you to expand a little bit on that.
Well, like I said, I did watch all 4 nights of it. And just listening to the rhetoric and just the vitriol that was coming from the platform, it was nothing that was substantial in moving the people forward. There was no agenda, there was no promise, there was no signs of hope. It was all fear mongering and what the Democrats is going to do if they get elected. I even heard one speaker say that if Biden is elected, like people are going to walk into your homes and pull you out and kill you. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'm like, how do you get to that? I mean, we're in a political conundrum, as you may say, where we have a pandemic going on. We have police injustice and inequalities going on. We have, don't forget about the 50,000 plus people that's unemployed. I mean, we're at such dire straits right now that I can't see why you would use that as a catalyst to promote your platform. I mean, come on, man. You're out here, you're saying you're for the people, but you're scaring the hell out of them at the same time. So how are you going to help somebody and you put them in a trauma?
Well, you know, that's interesting that comment. And again, I'm taking your word for it because I did not watch it. And honestly, I'll just say this, and some people may say that's irresponsible of you, who is a host of a podcast, political podcast, not to watch the RNC. But I tell you, I took that not having a platform when they came out and said they had a platform. I said there's no reason for me to even watch it. So that's the reason why I had every intentions of watching the convention, but when they came out and said they had no platform, I didn't think there was any need for me to invest any of my time, other than, of course, I watched some of the recaps and things like that. But what you so I'll take what you said, that one of the speakers said that if Biden wins, they're going to come into your homes and kill you under a Biden presidency. Well, was Biden the president when Breonna Taylor was in her home sleep and someone invaded her house and murdered her? So I think it's I think on both parties. I mean, there's people are out there, just making these absurd comments. But the sad part about it, I really want to talk a little bit about this. We're in the middle of a pandemic. It's 5 million cases of corona, heading quickly to 6 million, close to about 185,000 Americans dead. We have unarmed black men being slaughtered in the streets by the police. We have one of the worst economies right now since the Depression. I think this economy actually has surpassed 2008 economic collapse that we witnessed. My question to you guys, and I think this is really good way to kind of bring this podcast home, is I'm one who follows the numbers and the data, the analytics. So I'm constantly, and I'll give these sites credit, I'm constantly on 538.com because I think Nate Silver does an outstanding job of collecting all of the polls, because some polls are biased. So he kind of collects all the polls and has some type of algorithm where kind of gives you somewhat of an accurate read on where the pulse of the election is, and also the approval ratings of the presidency. But not only that, but it also gives you some historical knowledge on where other presidents were. Some of the past presidents were, I think, going all the way back to maybe Carter, maybe Nixon and Ford as well. But just kind of show you where their approval rating were at this time, to kind of so you can compare apples to apples with this. I also follow not just that, but I follow the betting markets. Many folks who probably don't know, a lot of the sports books that are located offshore. Of course, betting, just want to be clear, betting for United States political offices is illegal in the United States. However, it is legal in Europe and in some of the casinos in the Caribbean. So I also follow, the betting markets as well. It's interesting because when you look at the polls, you see Joe Biden holding and maintaining probably between a 7 to 9 point national market lead. And also when you look at the Electoral College, which you need 270 to win. He's been hovering around 315 to about 319 electoral votes over Trump, which would put him well in position to win the election. However, when we look at the betting markets, it's either dead even or Donald Trump is the favorite. So I want to talk about the betting markets, and I want to say, Tim, why do you think folks with money, and let me just say this before I get to Tim, for those of you who don't understand the betting market, basically the odds are really not created based off of who the casinos believe are going to win. It's really based off of where people are betting their hard-earned money. So, if folks come in and bet, $1 million on Donald Trump, that will kind of make him the favorite. They do that to kind of balance out their books. So I want to ask you, Tim, why is it so close? I mean, I gave the data out there, the condition of America right now, pretty much heading off a cliff. Why do you think the elections is so close? This to the naked eye, this seems like it's just such a clear choice that people should want change. What's going on here?
That's a good question. I think I learned in 2016 not to speculate too much on how the what can happen in an election. I think a lot of it is just that people are these are some generalizations I'll be making. But to answer your question, I think there are people who are seeing the house burn down around them. Like you said, the pandemic just being allowed to ravage the country, mass death on a largely preventable basis. Economic crisis looming, mass eviction, mass layoffs. There's a clear sort of political crisis and social crisis going on. People are feeling that the only way to be heard is to demonstrate in the street, and they're right about that. And people are starting to see this kind of all accumulate. The strongest hurricane since the 19th century just landed into the mainland while California is on fire. So I think there people are realizing all these crises that we're facing, and the problem is there is no real answer from either party. And like you said, they can both basically just fearmonger about how worse it's going to get if the other person comes in. And I think people are desperate, confused, and scared, and I think looking for some way to change this and get us off on a different course. And I don't think either party is giving any real convincing answer to that. I think that you have the people, these people and these parties have been in power for as long as I've been alive, on and off. These are the same people who have been, kind of playing a game of musical chairs with governmental power for a while. And all the Democrats can basically say is, the problem is Trump. Let's get Trump out, and then we'll have this. We'll come back to this sort of America that really never existed, but they're trying to sort of harken back to, of like, this is not who we are. We need to come together in unity and shared values and blah 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 blah. And
a kumbaya moment.
Yeah, sure.
And
kumbaya.
The other side is basically like, like I'm Trump is a disruptor. Trump is draining the swamp, shaking up Washington, screwing over all the people that have been in power this long, and like sort of a funny dance of like, yes, things are all collapsing while I'm president, but if the answer to that is make me president again.
Right.
But so I think there's just a lot of, without any actual substantial platforms or answers, or no one can point to a better future, because at root, because the capitalist system is in terminal decline. It was somewhat of a progressive force for the last couple of centuries, and it's reaching its decaying moment where it really can't offer anything better.
That's right.
So instead, the politicians, you sort of have to get out in front of this and sort of be these sort of governing leaders, cannot offer anything better. It's either we need to go back to the way things were.
That's right.
Or and if we or we just have to manage how bad it's gonna get.
That's right.
Where it's just stemming off threats, not providing anything to vote for any future to strive for.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna get to Walt real quick. Walt, let me ask you the same question. Why do you think it's so close?
So close as far as what, the two platforms?
Yeah, no, why is the election so close at this point? It's pretty much like a toss-up right now, according to the betting markets and also the polls.
Because I don't think that the public has really been swayed by either candidate, to tell you the truth. I think that those that was already set on voting on who they were going to vote for was already there. Like I said, the public sentiment, I believe, at this time is just mundane. There's nothing from either party that really uplifted you and made you motivated to really want to get out there and galvanize that particular party. Even though we have a lot that's at stake right now, I don't think that there's enough being given by the Democratic Party to really drive it home and have them understand the severity of where we're at right now. The Republicans is already in control. They got the Senate, and they're doing everything with these laws and putting these federal judges in and everything else. So it's like the only thing that we have left of a democracy, the only thing that we have left of a remnant of trying to maintain order is that vote. And until these people, undecided, undeclared, want to sit at home and hope that it passed by like 2016, is sadly mistaken. So the objective is to get as many people involved in this process as possible, to let them see that we do and we can make that change. But until then, like I said, we're going to be in a sad state of affairs, and it's going to be way worse if they let this guy get another run in his office.
So I guess the point is, and I think we talked a little bit about this with the Democrats talking about saving democracy. However, systemic racism has flourished under the so-called democracy. So my question to you guys, before we go into one last question that I have for you guys, is democracy worth saving? Tim, I'll start with you.
I think that what's worth building is a workers' democracy is the end goal. So we need to have no illusions that any real change, I don't think, can happen through these institutions that we call democratic. They are so straitjacketed in terms of what's an acceptable action to take by the power of monopoly capitalism, international global monopoly capitalism. Like, they are so hemmed in and have basically been gutted in terms of their ability to intervene or influence these things, that there are no answers there. What we need to do is start building some sort of workers' party, class independent workers' party, which, depending on how the election goes, might, actually start to become more of a possibility, because I think we're going into tumultuous times, whether we like it or not. And it's basically going to be what organizations and structures and institutions are there when things really start to crack. And if we can have a class independent working, like some sort of workers organization, whether that's a working class political party that can participate in current electoral politics and sort of build that way, or organic institutions outside of the American electoral system as it is now. Those, we need to build those, because when things break apart, we need to be able to steer it in the right direction and build a government by and for the working class that has, can dismantle the current, capitalist state, and we can start having true, meaningful democracy, not only every 2 years or 4 years or 6 years, but not in the state, in the workplace, democratically run the economy and the state by and for working people. And that would, so the question, like, do I believe in democracy? I believe in us fighting for and trying to build true democracy, not a democracy that is basically a mask on top of a deeply authoritarian and unequal economic and social system.
Walt, do you think democracy is worth saving?
The way that it looks now, it would definitely have to be altered version of it. Like I said, and how we explained it, like the racist rhetoric and implementations in it, in a way that is secretly woven into the American fabric. Yeah, I definitely 100% with Tim as far as a workers' movement. It's going to have to be a collaborative. It can't just be one faceted. It's really tricky, man. It's real tricky.
Cool. And I have one more question. I'll start with you, Walt, as we close out, and go to you, Tim, as well. So what's the plan? Let's fast forward to November the 4th. What is the plan if Joe Biden wins? What is the plan if Donald Trump wins? I'll start with you, Walt.
Well, if let's start with the I can't even say the lesser of two evils, because they're all under the same umbrella. We can start with Trump. If Trump wins, I mean, we definitely going to have to take to the streets, and we're definitely going to have to take back everything that's going to be like pulled from under us. I mean, even at the local levels of officials being elected into office and things of that nature. I mean, he's only going to do but so much if we allow him to do it. We know he's moving to an authoritarianship, dictatorship. I mean, the people are going to have to galvanize and pull together, and just going to have to. Oh man, I hate to say it, man. It may lead to a civil war. There may be bloodshed on the homestead, just to get back our basics. And the same thing for Joe Biden. Joe Biden will give you the illusion that they're going to change and fix everything, but as soon as that inauguration date is when the clock starts ticking. I mean, we can't take our foot off the gas. We can't get complacent like we did under the Barack years. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we as a people failed. Like, he gave the window and the opportunity for these progressive movements and things to be done, and nobody took advantage of it. And when it was too late, I mean, the ship had sailed. Right. And now we're battling to swim upstream with holes in our life jacket. I mean, it's going to be a tumultuous task, but those that are able to brave the storm are going to have to really get out there and really put blood, sweat, and tears into getting us a formidable platform and something that we can look forward to.
Tim, what's the plan if Donald Trump and it wins on November 4th, or Joe Biden wins?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the election actually rolls out. There's a lot wrong with how the voting system is right now, especially with the pandemic and this whole thing about the post office. And like we talked about earlier, both parties have presented this as a life or death struggle. So I think whoever loses is going to be very reactive, I guess, or very, I think it's going to be really hard to sort of just have any peaceful transfer of power. But after the Pentagon broke with Trump when he was calling for mass destruction of the military on the protesters, and they said no, that sort of showed me that there's no real even I don't think Trump's going to be able to stay in office if it looks like he meaningfully lost. If it becomes close, or there's like an electoral college thing again, or we have like another Bush v. Gore situation, I think it's going to get really, really bad. If Trump wins, I think it would be a complete lack of legitimacy for the Democratic Party. I think there would be a big opening to find an alternative party in that case that could easily eclipse the Democrats out of power. It might not happen right away, but we already start seeing these sort of burgeoning new parties coming up. I think there would be a real opportunity to start building a workers' party on that case, because I think the Democratic Party really doesn't have much support except for people who are against Trump, and a lot of people have the faith in them they can deliver on that front. And if they fail twice, I think that's going to be a big, even fatal blow to them. I think, like Walt said, he's going to feel that he has more of a free reign authoritatively. I think the threat of civil war is not as much there yet, because the working class right now is so large and bigger and more powerful than it's ever been in history. And in this country, organized labor has largely been crushed. But with the spontaneous solidarity mass movement that we saw this summer, I think as Trump tries to be more authoritative, it's going to quickly resolve. People's consciousness is going to quickly change, and people are going to really feel that, yes, trying to their idea of politics is going to change, where it's not just participating electorally, but it's going and out into the arena, into the streets, and taking action. And so I think that's going to quickly change people's consciousness. And that's what I was talking about, where what organizations are there and already formed when that stuff happens. And I think we have to be pretty careful with the foreign policy too, where both parties are trying to outdo each other with who can be tougher on China. As sort of the US empire collapses and we start losing global market hegemony to China, and I think a lot of the ruling class will see that as a solution to the domestic crisis, is to export it into what they hope would be a new Cold War, but could we already barely dodged nuclear annihilation in the Cold War. I mean that's really playing with fire. So I think we need to really be mindful not to allow them to sort of rally around the flag in some sort of nationalist patriotic fashion and direct all this anger and resentment outward, which I think is a big concern. But make no mistake that whoever goes in is going to be dealing with the largest economic crisis that we've really ever seen. The director of the European Central Bank called it the largest crisis capitalism has faced in 300 years, and so that's 1720, when capitalism was like just starting to become sort of
right.
a the hegemonic global system. The IMF is forecasting horrible downturns, and this is going to cause an economic crisis where, like I said, either party is really hemmed into what they can do, and what they can really only do is more austerity. And this is on top of a decade of austerity that we've already seen after 2008, and it's going to be even more. They've had extreme debt buildup, trying to keep the system afloat, like massive government spending, and they've been printing a lot of money too. So there's inflation concerns, and that debt has to be paid back somehow. And the ruling class is not going to tax themselves. They're gonna make the working class pay for it. So you're going to have massive austerity, which is going to even further drive people's political consciousness and sort of take, I think, a drive to sort of take action outside of what's acceptable.
That's right.
By the rules. The Biden, I think, is just like Walt said. I think that there's a danger that at first people will, go back to brunch. I think is sort of the joke, oh, we've done it. We've gotten rid of Trump. Everything's going to be hunky dory. We can relax. And I think that's going to quickly blow up in people's faces. I think Biden is also going to be forced to implement austerity. I would argue that even Bernie Sanders would have had to implement austerity. I mean, this is what I'm talking about. It's not like what these people want. It's literally like the logic of the system. And those austerity measures are going to very quickly cause disillusionment with anyone who had any aspirations in the Democratic Party changing things. And so we have to basically, like Walt said, use that ability to show people that the Democratic Party is not the savior either. What we need is, class independent organizations, and ideally a workers' governmental party. Another big fear for Biden is if he does win, like I said, he's not going to be able to put in any reforms. Nothing is really going to get better. They're going to largely get worse because of the level of inertia and the limits of what the capitalist system will allow. And that leaves room for the people who are behind Trump right now to basically, point out everything bad, like how the crisis unfolds will largely fall on the Democrats and the liberals' shoulders, and that's going to leave open room for the Republican Party to get even more jingoistic and even more sort of ethno-nationalist and all these tendencies that are sort of starting to arise in the Republican Party are going to get much worse. And I'm afraid you're going to see an even more dangerous and much more competent Trump in 2024. I don't know who it's going to be, but I think
Donald Trump Jr.
What?
Donald Trump Jr.
I don't know about him. He's sort of.
Let's hope not. Let's hope not.
I think he's too stupid. I think you're going to see some really cold-blooded political operative arise. It's either going to be some Republican governor or Tom Cotton, who was just like writing New York Times op-eds about how we need to like bring the troops into the streets. It's going to be someone like that who, a lot of what saved us from Trump over these last 4 years is how sort of frankly moronic and stupid, and he doesn't really he doesn't really know how to wield the levers of power. And I think if Biden comes in and he has to address the myriad of crises that will be confronting, like some of the worst crises this country has ever faced, and all the blame is gonna fall on him, and it's gonna create a very scary response. Just like the Tea Party arose from Obama, I think we're going to see a very dangerous Republican Party come out of into 2024 if Biden wins. So we have to fight with, again, the power of and solidarity between the working class to really hem in what's an embryonic fascism that I don't think is a real threat now, and there's definitely fascists in the streets as we saw. But as far as like them taking power is, again, like I said with Walt's Civil War comment, I think that we have a more powerful working class than ever that is largely in the way of that. But it's the struggle is going to become very real. Really, whoever wins, it's just whether it's outright immediately or whether it's in response to Biden's failures in the way of the crises. So,
and here's my plan. Basically, I know we were talking about what to do on November the 4th, but my take and my plan is do not wait until November the 4th. I think the planning should start today. And first and foremost, I think that I wanted to tell our viewers and listening audience is number one is to divest any emotions that you have in this elections point. The emotional part of an election is something that the ruling class wants to draw you in. They want to draw and extract as much energy that they can possibly get into their foolishness and shenanigans. So the first and foremost thing that you need to do is to divest any type of emotions in this, which the good cop, bad cop. You have Joe Biden being the good cop, and you have Donald Trump being the bad cop. And as you saw in Minnesota, there were some good cops and bad cops, but when it came at the end of the day, there was a killing of a black man underneath the knee of the bad cops, while the good cops sat there and watched that man's life go away in 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Let us not be that guy, the American people. Let's not be that symbolism of George Floyd. Let the ruling class put their foot on our necks. Number two, take action. And I'll use again the George Floyd analogy. Had we not relied on the cops to take action, and had the people who were standing around there with the iPhones, got in there and ripped that guy off of George Floyd's neck, George Floyd would be with us today. Yes, there would have been some retributions for that person, and yes, there would have been some sacrifices. But at the end of the day, George Floyd would be alive today. That's the same here. Let's stand up and let's not be. Yes, you could lose your job. You lose, some securities that you're looking for, food, clothing, and shelter. But again, we will continue. We will continue to live and sustain ourselves in this life. So let's stop looking to these politicians to sustain the lives which God gave to us, and which we are responsible for sustaining, ourselves. And number three, be active. I mean, one of the things I want to come across out of this is to vote. I think, but it's not just voting, as both Tim and Walt had mentioned so eloquently throughout this program. Voting is just one part of the process. We have to continue on the pressure, and let's not wait until November the 4th to apply this pressure. Start applying that pressure today, because at the end of the day, the leadership is in place and they need to hear from you. So email, or if you're on Twitter, mention your local congressman, and let them know that you're looking for change. Stay engaged from here on out. And then finally, I think at the end of the day, whoever wins, I think that we need to continue on with our program and platform. We already saw that the Republicans just came out straight up and said we don't have any platform. And as Tim mentioned, he said the Democrats really didn't have a platform for us either, which is true. So that we need to create a people's platform, and we need to, and even if we don't get together, and unify, you yourself should have your own personal platform, which you want to see. You are a tax-paying citizen. We need to have our platform together, if it's not even with a group, if not even with a party, but you should prepare your own personal platform of what changes that you want to see being made, and you need to pressure those ahead. And one last thing before we close out, send it to you, Walt, to close things out is, Tim mentioned about us working, we're the working class. And right now, and Walt, I always joke with you, a lot of times you may call me at 1 o'clock or whatever, just to check in on me. And I say, hey, you're finally, we're both maybe at work. And I say, hey, finally, we're finally working for ourselves now, because the first, assuming someone's working from 9 to 5, from 9 to 1, you're working for the government or for the ruling class in taxes and things like that, and just sheer taxes. And then from 1 to 5, you're allegedly working for you're working for yourself, for your money. You finally get that, but out of your cut, you still got to pay mortgage. You still got to keep your heat on. You still got to go out and get your own food, and you pay the co-payments for your health coverage and things like that. So essentially, you're really not working for yourself. And if we continue to go down this road, and I'm speaking for not only my daughter, my sons, and also my granddaughter, eventually what's going to happen is they're going to be working 8 hours for this ruling class. Which in turn will say, okay, for you to make something for yourself, now you got to work 10 hours just so you can get 2 hours for yourself. So think of it like that. Do you really want to work 8 hours yourself, and then your children to work 10 hours just to be able to secure the basic God-given necessities in life? So I leave folks with a couple of those points, and we're looking as a plan and take this as a step. But Tim, man, thank you once again for joining us. And again, we will continue to bring you on as our political and economic analyst to kind of keep us and give us a great perspective. I'm still looking for someone, Tim kind of brings us a perspective from the Marxist side. I'm still looking for a capitalist, so I'm looking for even a Trump supporter to come on in and join us. The water is warm. So Walt, take us home.
We'll get him. We want to thank Tim again for coming in and giving us some strong, substantive information regarding the state of affairs. Tim, if you want to run down your information, how you can be located and how people can get in touch with you, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll just say, as Walt and Rob said, if you see that you want to, in taking political action, if you're curious about socialism or the ideas, or want to see a Marxist perspective on things, go to socialistrevolution.org or marxist.com and check out what we stand for, what our platform is, and how we are assessing this world that we're in. And if you want to join a revolutionary organization, think that's the best way you want to express your politics, we're always looking for new members. So you can find that on the website, socialistrevolution.org and marxist.com.
That's great.
And thanks you guys. I'd love to come on again. I could probably, if you can find some Trump supporter, I mean, that would definitely make for an interesting podcast.
Oh, definitely. Like I said, we appreciate you again, and this was definitely another exciting adventure of the All In Politics platform and the All In Network. This is the real to jump off, and I was your host, Walter Jamager, alongside my co-host
at Rob Cooper Jr. on Instagram, not Twitter.
You got it. Hey, yo, thanks for keeping us honest, Tim. And as always, keep your ear to the floor. And our news is your news. We're all in it together. Peace.